She is the first princess born into royalty in 500 years. It is rumored that only she can break the curse on her brothers. However, from birth, she was kidnapped by bad people and domesticated as a weakly slave, becoming the pet of the nobles. When her brother found her, little Wednesday was being beaten. Her cheeks were very swollen. Beside her, the slave owner raised the whip, preparing the next punishment. He did it just to vent his anger. However, before the barbed whip fell, someone kicked the study door open forcefully. The newcomer had short, platinum blonde hair. He was followed by a large group of knights armed to the teeth. The slave owner recognized him instantly. It is the cruelest prince of the empire. It is said that anyone who offends him ends up dead without a trace. The man trembled with fear, and the prince brushed him aside with a kick full of contempt. In his hands, he already had proof of the slave trade, but now he has something more important to do. He observes dangerously the girl beside him. That is the purpose of his journey. To find his little sister, lost years ago, because his family carries an evil curse. Everyone will die at the hands of their loved ones, unless a girl were born into this royal family, consisting only of men. However, hundreds of years passed, and no princess was born. Until 10 years ago, the emperor's favorite concubine gave birth to an adorable girl, but this poor creature, still in the fortress, was stolen. Throughout all these years, the royalty has spent many resources searching for her, and there has been no shortage of girls who, out of ambition, have tried to pass themselves off as her. But no imposter has succeeded, because her family keeps another secret. Her eyes, they change color according to her mood. When she is sad, they are red. When she is restless, they are green. When she is calm, they are blue. And when she is angry, they turn a terrifying black. The crown prince received information before arriving. They said there was a blonde girl here who could be the princess, but this girl is too small. The little sister has been missing for 10 years, and this tiny girl seems to be at most 6 or 7 years old. The man, without much hope, brushed the girl's bangs aside. Clear and bright red eyes, but after a while, they didn't change color at all. Da Huangzi lowered his gaze, disappointed, and yet, he felt great relief. He really couldn't imagine that his sister had lived as a slave for all these years. Before leaving, the man ruffled the girl's hair and gave her a stuffed puppy. The little princess's eyes instantly filled with tears, but she was a despicable slave, not worthy of such a good gift. The girl desperately called out to the first prince. The man turned around and froze. She was truly the lost princess of the empire. Her brother finally knew. This little slave, covered in wounds, was his sister lost years ago. The first prince felt a sharp pain in his chest. His sister, the noblest princess of the empire, was treated as a slave and abused for 10 years, all because of that damned man. The crown prince drew a sword. He wished to kill the slave owner to vent his anger, seeing that the man was about to extend his hand. The knight beside him quickly covered the girl's eyes. "Your Highness, the little princess, is still present." Hearing that, the already angry crown prince quickly withdrew his hand. The girl was already a little afraid of him. He couldn't leave any new shadows for his sister. So the crown prince ordered that this guilty slave owner be dragged to the corridor. He drew his sword again. However, the blade avoided all vital points. Just when everyone wondered if the princess had softened him, they heard him say coldly, "Die, it is too little for him. Whoever dares to hurt my sister deserves to live in hell." The slave owner's heart-rending screams echoed in the hallway, but the crown prince refused to keep watching. His sister was still waiting for him. The crown prince returned to the study. He knelt gently in front of the girl. He patiently explained to his sister her sudden identity as a princess. However, the girl couldn't believe it. He explained again and again to the man, she is just a little slave, not a princess, not knowing that those words would only make the first prince feel more pain. He secretly swore that from now on he would be twice as good to his sister, that he would make up for those 10 lost years. But at that moment, a black-haired slave suddenly burst in. He shouted, "Where are you taking Wednesday?" Everyone was confused. The boy had already run to the little princess and checked her wounds. Then, he stood protectively in front of her. The crown prince realized that the boy had no bad intentions, but he didn't understand why he called her sister. Wednesday, the boy explained to everyone. They were all domestic slaves, domesticated according to the day of the week. The girl served her masters on Wednesdays. That's why they called her Wednesday. They had no names. They were the lowest-ranking slaves in the house. When the first prince heard half of it, His fists were already cracking. He really was a failed brother. But it wasn't too late yet. He ordered his subordinates to take the princess back to the palace. But at that moment, the boy blocked their path, risking his life. He should take her away and pamper her. However, this slave who suddenly appeared blocked their path. He begged the crown prince to take him too, just to be with the princess. He would do anything. A flash of disdain crossed the man's eyes, probably another greedy child. He ordered the boy to step aside, but the young man didn't flinch. He closed his fist and lowered it to his chest. "I swear on my life that I will protect Wednesday forever." The determination in the boy's eyes seemed sincere. But the crown prince, impassive, drew his weapon. The sharp blade rested on the young man's throat. The boy swallowed nervously, but he didn't back down a step, because he knows that if he steps aside now, he will forever lose the right to protect Wednesday. And the little princess beside him can't take it anymore. Throughout all these years, Domingo has been by her side to overcome those painful days. Without the boy's care, the master would probably have killed her already. The girl interrupted him without caring, wanting to stand in front of Domingo. Seeing that the situation was becoming chaotic, the crown prince withdrew his sword. He had already verified the young man's sincerity. Being his sister's friend, he would take care of him too. The crown prince took responsibility for taking care of Domingo. He handed him over to the knight commander who accompanied him. This child has courage and determination. With a little training, he will become a pillar of the empire. As for his sister, he gently caressed her cheek. Then, he ordered the princess to be taken to the carriage. A group of people are camping on the side of the road to rest. Da Huangzi can't help but ask about his sister's condition. This mission to find the princess is carried out in secret. That's why the carriages they brought are very old. I don't know if my sister is used to sleeping there. However, his subordinate tells him that the princess believes she does not deserve such a good carriage. It took them a lot to convince her to get into the carriage. Once in the carriage, she didn't cry or protest for fear of causing trouble. After listening to his subordinate's report, the first prince's heart shrank painfully. His sister was so sensible. How dare those slave traders treat her like that? The first prince gave an immediate order: execute all the criminals involved in this case. All of them. Afterward, he himself tirelessly searched for his sister's carriage. The little princess was curled up in a corner, while the stuffed animal he had given her was carefully placed on the seat. The first prince no longer dared to think, "What kind of life has my little sister had?" Moved, he lifted her in his arms, took off his cloak, and carefully placed it over his sister. He regretted not having found his little sister sooner. That way, she wouldn't have had to suffer in the slave camp. Seeing his little sister curled up on the ground, the crown prince was filled with deep remorse. He lifted her tenderly. In passing, he also tucked the stuffed puppy into her arms. The little princess, wrapped in her brother's cloak, slept soundly. The crown prince showed an unusual smile of satisfaction. It must be said that this was the night the little princess slept most comfortably. The warm cloak still retained a pleasant scent. When the girl woke up, it was already completely dawn. She hurriedly got up from the bench, and the cloak she was wearing fell to the ground. She was lost. Not only had she not gotten up early to work, but she had also dirtied her brother's cloak. The little princess froze, filled with remorse. She was so nervous she almost cried, just as her knight went to call her for breakfast. The little princess immediately apologized humbly. She truly didn't know why her brother's cloak was on her. She didn't dirty it on purpose. The knight quickly comforted the little princess. The cloak was because the crown prince was afraid she would be cold. He had just put it on her. Even if the princess threw it on the ground on purpose, her brother wouldn't be angry, only surprised that someone as irascible as her brother could have such a tender side. With that said, he gently lowered the girl from the carriage and led her to the long outdoor table. The creamy fresh milk soup gave off a tempting aroma, but the little princess didn't dare to try it. Even though no one here was going to hurt her anymore, the mistreatment and beatings suffered for 10 years had convinced her that she didn't deserve to be happy. Luckily, the knight constantly encouraged her. So the little princess mustered her courage and tried a couple of bites. It was really delicious. She was so moved, she almost cried. But she also remembered Domingo. Since they parted ways at the slave camp that day, they hadn't seen each other again. According to what she had been told, Domingo was out with the knight who was taking care of him. He would return in a few days, Although the little princess felt great sadness, but at the same time, incredibly lucid. At least they will be able to be together. Days later, the caravan arrived at the imperial city. The little princess was no longer as shy as at the beginning. She excitedly poked her head out the window. It was the first time she had seen such a beautiful landscape. The princess was expectant and nervous. According to the knights, 2 more brothers awaited her in the palace. I don't know what kind of personalities her brothers will have. She hopes they will be like her knight brother, so kind, but it doesn't matter if he's like the crown prince. Although her older brother seems cold on the outside, he shows her special attention. The little princess yearns for her family. He is finally no longer the poor little girl no one wants. She is clearly the only princess of the empire, but she only dares to sleep curled up on the floor. A simple piece of bread can brighten her whole day. The journey back to the imperial city is hard and exhausting, but the little one has never asked for anything. However, her sweetness and obedience made her even more touching. De Huangzi longed to lay all the good things in the world at his sister's feet. So the man ordered his subordinates to provide the little princess with a luxury carriage. They had already entered the imperial capital. There was no need to hide their whereabouts. However, the response he received was that he had to wait for approval. At this moment, the eldest prince became completely enraged. He ordered his subordinates to handle it immediately. His sister traveled without a single complaint along the way, but she had to travel in the most dilapidated carriage, receiving the adoration of the people. The eldest prince's heart was full of bitterness. He owed his sister too much. Luckily, the new carriage was ready quickly. It is the first time the little princess has seen such a luxurious carriage. She looks at it mesmerized. Can she really travel in such a clean and beautiful carriage? Seeing that his sister doesn't get in, the eldest prince thinks she doesn't like it. In his opinion, girls like carriages full of flowers more, so he immediately ordered his subordinates to prepare another one. However, the sensible little princess stopped him immediately. Brother, changing the carriage has already caused everyone trouble. The girl sincerely said that this carriage is very good. She doesn't want to be a burden to her brothers. The girl's words instantly made the crown prince's eyes water. He told his sister that she didn't have to resign herself. As long as it was what she wanted, even if it were the stars in the sky, her brother would bring them down for her. He saw that his brother's eyes had turned red with sadness. The little princess's heart felt both nervousness and happiness. It was the first time someone had cared so much about her. The girl responded to her brother with a warm smile. Her eyes also turned golden, the color of happiness. Seeing this, the first prince felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Affectionately, he stroked the girl's head. My little sister is so kind. The term little sister made the little princess compose herself. It was as if a lost child had found refuge. Now she also had an older brother who loved her. So, the little princess, lost abroad, has finally been welcomed back to the palace. The frightened people enthusiastically acclaim her. Multicolored ribbons and a sky of flowers welcome the girl home. They firmly believe that this princess, capable of breaking the curse, will bring hope to this country. Only the little princess can break the curse on her brothers, but she never had a proper name. In the slave camp, she was Wednesday. That wasn't her name, just the day she served her master. Back then, she even envied her master's horse. The wildflowers. They did have names, but why didn't she? Could it be because she isn't mature enough to deserve one? And from that day on, the little princess worked from morning till night. Even if they beat her, she endured the pain without crying or protesting. Until her brothers found her, she still only had the code Wednesday, but it didn't matter anymore. Now she has family and friends. Even though she doesn't have a name, she is happy. She tells herself that she can't be more greedy, but the little princess didn't imagine that her brother and father had already prepared everything for her. The girl excitedly opens this special gift. Inside is a handwritten letter from her father and a sprout that emits a faint light. The little princess looks at the letter. An expression of shame appears on her face. She tells her brother, bluntly, that she doesn't know how to read. The crown prince feels another pang of pain. He quickly comforts his sister. In passing, he reads her the emperor's surname. The little princess sits docilely on her brother's lap. In her mind, she unconsciously fantasizes about the image of her father. Her father said that he missed her very much, and that when he finished all his affairs, he would come back to see her. And finally, her dad gave her a surprise, a name just for her. In an ancient language, the word for sprout is pronounced Chloe. It represents happiness and hope. That is her name, the little princess murmured softly. Her eyes sparkled with tears. Instantly, her brother hugged her tightly. The brother gently wiped away her tears, calling her tenderly, Chloe. The first prince has completely unlocked his brotherly instincts. He hoped his sister would reply sweetly, brother. However, the little Chloe timidly called him, Your Royal Highness. The man's eyes instantly turned red with sadness, an expression of suffering like that of a child who hasn't been given candy. However, the scene frightened the little princess. She thought she had done something wrong. Her eyes turned green with unease. Just as she was about to apologize, the crown prince hurried to control his emotions. He knew that getting his sister to open up to him was not something he could achieve overnight, so in the future, he would dote on her twice as much. What he liked most was that his sister accompanied him to eat, snuggled with him to sleep, that she was by his side. He would always be the most tender and considerate older brother, but who would have thought that? In front of others, he is a cold and violent Chujin. Even for the position of crown prince, he wouldn't hesitate to cut open his father's chest. All this is because of the damned curse. But now the little princess has returned home. The first prince can clearly feel that the power of the curse is weakening. Only with his sister by his side could he remain calm. He no longer had to worry about dying at the hands of his beloved. This sister brought hope to the entire country. But they didn't expect that the little princess they searched for day and night had spent her entire childhood in a slave camp. The eldest prince's heart ached intensely. Back at the palace, he prepared the most luxurious room for his sister. All the furniture was custom-made in small sizes. He ordered a closet full of dresses made for her and gave her a mountain of toys. But even so, he felt he owed his sister too much. If he could, he would even offer the throne to his younger sister. However, for the little princess, all these gestures from her brother overwhelmed her. It must be remembered that when you are a slave, you slept curled up on a straw mat. A simple, insignificant screw entertained her and her friends all day long. And now, life is like a dream. She has clean pajamas, she has a warm blanket. The enormous bed she snuggles into is as soft as a cloud. She is already satisfied. But that night, the little princess had another nightmare. She suddenly woke up from the bed. Only after checking that she wasn't in the cell and seeing him was she relieved. In the silent night, she occasionally remembered the delivery of dinner. The frightened little princess hugged her small stuffed dog tightly. At that moment, she was no longer sleepy. So bravely, she took out the tender sprout that her dad had given her. A soft light gave the little princess courage in the darkness, and also made her think of Domingo. She wonders how he is now, if he will have a new name like her. The little princess naively believed that the boy also lived a pampered life like her, but she didn't know that Domingo was in a situation worse than slavery too. The girl had 3 prince brothers who adored her. The eldest, tender and authoritative, always gave her gifts. The second, funny and witty, knew how to make her laugh. The third, mysterious and reserved, also held her in his heart. A little princess like that should have had a happy childhood. But she was stolen by traffickers. She grew up as a slave. Until 15 days ago, when the first prince found her injured. Since then, the helpless little princess finally has a decent home. That's why she values her current happiness so much. Today is the first time the little princess has eaten in the palace. For fear that his younger sister wouldn't like the food, the crown prince specially brought in the best chef in the empire. A wide variety of dishes gave off a tempting aroma. The little princess's stomach was empty. But thinking that her brother hadn't arrived yet, she didn't dare to start eating before him. So the little princess closed her eyes tightly. She told herself not to be greedy, that she had to wait for her brother. But the girl didn't imagine that her sensible gesture would almost cause a stir in the palace. The butler, upon learning that the little princess was neither eating nor drinking, immediately notified the crown prince. The man, who was in a meeting, stood up immediately, not caring about the ministers in the office. He hurriedly arrived at the dining room. As soon as he entered, he saw little Chloe clutching her stomach in pain, and a large table full of food remained untouched. My sister must be sick. But the instant their eyes met, the girl's expression of pain turned into a sweet smile. He didn't expect his sister to be so happy to see him, but Da Huangzi couldn't help but worry. Fortunately, the little princess only had a stomachache from hunger, and the reason she did this was just to wait for her brother to eat with her. The Huangzi felt a pang in his heart upon hearing this. He immediately apologized to his sister. It was that he unintentionally arrived late. If only he had known how important it was to his sister, he would never have been late, but he also told her sweetly that the next time he was late, she should eat first. He didn't want his sister to go hungry because of him. The little princess nodded docilely, but in her eyes, she couldn't hide her disappointment. She still thought that this time eating, she might see her other two brothers, but she heard her older brother say that they had important evidence to process. The little princess told herself that she shouldn't be too ambitious. However, the second prince, upon learning that his sister had been found that very day, hurried back to the imperial palace. The little princess was hungry and her stomach hurt. She only wanted to wait for her brothers to eat together. The sad little one clutched her belly. But even so, only one brother arrived. The insecure girl couldn't help but wonder, could it be her slave status that makes her brothers uncomfortable? Right now, she doesn't look like a princess at all. Even in an elegant dress, her messy hair makes her look like a refugee. If she changed her hairstyle, would her brothers like her more? But without her hair covering her face, she had to accept those cursed eyes. Her brother had told her they were the symbol of royalty. But the accumulated damage over the years was already ingrained in her bones. She always unconsciously tried to cover those beautiful eyes. The first prince seemed to notice her discomfort. The next day, he summoned the most famous, renowned stylist. He felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Styling the princess's hair was the honor of his life. But along the way, the butler seriously warned him to watch his words, which inevitably made him think that the princess would be an extremely demanding client. He finally arrived at the princess's chambers. Sarah gave a respectful bow, but he was surprised to find the girl unexpectedly docile and polite. Her small hands were clenched tightly. Upon seeing the person arriving, he immediately responded with a polite smile. The little princess's behavior immediately won the stylist's affection. However, when Sarah lowered her head, she noticed the ugly scar on the back of the girl's hand. It is an exclusive mark of slaves. Now she suddenly understood the meaning of the butler's picture. Her gaze towards the little princess also filled with pity. This child must have suffered a lot before, so she has to dress the little princess very beautifully. However, her first step encountered a problem due to chronic malnutrition. The ends were dry and split. Sarah kindly asked the girl if she could cut it. The little princess hesitated. She had originally been encouraged to change, but the idea of cutting her hair as short as a boy's made her recoil. But since her brother found the stylist for her, he surely wants her to look prettier. She should trust her brother. Thinking this, the girl nodded firmly. What followed was a long time of styling. As the hair gradually fell, the little princess also said goodbye in her mind to her past self. From today on, she would no longer be that little slave. She would strive to become a worthy princess. Finally, the stylist stopped the scissors. The little princess stared intently at herself in the mirror. Short, wavy hair that enhanced her charm and joy, and to complete it, a lively butterfly bow. She couldn't believe it. That dull, light girl in the mirror, it was herself. Sarah observes today's result with satisfaction, but before leaving, she instructs the butler to prepare a new pair of gloves for the little princess. She always hides her hands in her sleeves to conceal those ugly scars. At this moment, the little princess is immersed in the joy of being beautified, unaware that her childhood friend is suffering in the storage room. The three brothers adore this only sister to make up for what they once owed her. They don't bat an eye when spending money. The little princess lives a pampered life that she didn't even dare to dream of. Naive as she was, she believed that Domingo was as happy as she was. She was unaware that the boy's days were not much easier than her own as Gintoki's slave. But the little princess knew nothing of this. She was eager to share the joy of this time with Domingo. She wanted to hear the boy call her Chloe sweetly, but she didn't know why. The crown prince didn't like Domingo, but under his sister's insistence, he agreed to let them see each other. One night, the little princess was so excited she couldn't sleep. She had so many things to tell Domingo, and she also had a mysterious gift to give him. However, this reunion after so long was unexpectedly awkward. The young man stood stiffly at the door. Although he was much taller than when they parted, he had lost the tenderness of the Gintoki slave from back then. Seeing that Sandian said nothing, the little princess approached him. She still wanted, as before, to give the boy a big hug. However, what she received was a humble gesture from the young man. "Your Royal Highness, Princess." 63A. A cold address, leaving the girl standing there, hurt. She couldn't believe that in just 1 month, he no longer liked her. The little princess blinked hard, struggling to hold back tears. She smiled at Domingo and told him that she had gotten him a new name, Dio, which in an ancient language means gift. Those dark times, they had overcome them together. For both of them, they were the best gift to each other. Dio loved that new name, but he lowered his head, ashamed. Before, he didn't know what it meant to be a princess. He didn't want to be separated from Wednesday, so he followed her to the palace. But now, he finally understood the difference between him and the princess, separated by an insurmountable abyss. The princess, beautiful, noble, and elevated, and him, an orphan, a simple commoner. Besides, the little princess didn't lack those who would protect her. The future he had imagined was nothing more than a joke. Dio's heart ached intensely. The little princess still believed that he didn't like his new name. She quickly said that if he didn't like it, they could change it. Dio shook his head. How could he not like it? It was that between them there was no turning back. That night, the little princess had a terrible nightmare. In the dream, she returned to the hellish slave camp. Only now she had Sunday's company. Those difficult days were no longer so hard. However, the scene changes. The boy suddenly becomes cold and distant. He treated her even worse than a stranger. The girl woke up, startled. Dio was acting very strange today. She wanted to go ask him what was wrong, but the little princess didn't imagine that her first outing at night would end with her brother catching her. The prince caught the little princess sneaking out in the middle of the night. She was terrified. The crown prince had told her that she should sleep well. Now her brother would surely be angry. The little princess lowered her head, ready to apologize, but she heard an unfamiliar voice, "But it doesn't feel like my older brother." She quickly changed her phrasing, "Your Highness the Crown Prince." She didn't expect that, in the darkness, a jovial laugh would suddenly sound. Then, a young man with an 80% resemblance to my older brother emerged from the darkness. The little princess raised her head. This must be her other brother, right? The girl asked timidly, "Are you His Highness the Second Prince?" The young man was stunned. The brothers rarely attended public events. Common people couldn't guess their identities. This beautiful girl in front of him could very well be his sister lost years ago. Before, the eldest brother had already mentioned in the letter the little princess's tragic past. After reading it, he wished to tear the traffickers to pieces, desperate to see his sister. The same day he received the letter, he returned without rest. Now, the person he longed for so much was in front of him. The young man didn't know how to behave. He observed her curiously, as if she were a doll. Then he murmured jokingly, "Doesn't look like him." He was telling the truth. His sister was so beautiful. She really didn't resemble their greedy-faced father. However, he didn't expect the little princess to lower her head shyly. Her vulnerable appearance looked as if she would cry at any moment. The second prince immediately realized that he had said something wrong. He should have thought about it before. How sensitive his sister was, after going through all that. How could he have been so careless as to make her cry? He quickly explained that it was because his sister was too beautiful, unlike his brothers, who were rough men. Afterward, he affectionately pinched his sister's soft white cheeks and even deliberately ruffled her soft, short hair. With that gesture, the little princess blushed completely. Compared to her previous dejected appearance, she now looked much more lively. The crown prince admired his work with satisfaction. His sister shouldn't show such a sad expression. Then, he lifted her in his arms, but the light body in his arms made the young man frown. If he remembered correctly, his sister was already 10 years old, but the weight he felt was like that of a 6 or 7-year-old child. He couldn't help but reproach himself inwardly. How his older brother had taken care of the girl during this time, but since he had returned, the important task of caring for his sister would fall on him. However, before that, he wanted to hear the little princess call him brother. Second, the girl looked at her little sister in his arms with expectant eyes. The little one blinked timidly, but even so, in a sweet and soft voice, she said, "Brother C-Day." That sweet brother completely conquered the second prince's heart, making him forget everything else. He only wanted to dote on his little sister. What do I do if my brother is too affectionate? The little princess could walk on her own, but the second prince lifted her in his arms. His broad embrace was warm and fragrant. The little princess's heart also began to beat uncontrollably. Note, however, she remembered she had something to look for. On Sunday, she struggled to get down. The second prince also noticed his sister's difficulty. He affectionately stroked the tip of her nose. The little princess thought her brother had agreed. However, the next second, the young man firmly opposed. "The castle is dark and cold at night. What if my little princess gets sick? Besides, obedient little one, you should be sleeping at this hour." The brother's tone is like that of a father, doting on his daughter. Although the girl protests with a pout, inside she feels happy. She prefers this witty and funny second brother over the serious and distant first prince. So the little princess obediently felt and let her brother carry her back to her bedroom. It must be said that the second prince makes a wonderful older brother. Affectionately, he tucks his sister into bed, seeing that the girl is not sleepy. He proposes telling her a bedtime story. Under the little princess's expectant gaze, the second prince begins to narrate ancient legends of this country. Once upon a time, long, long ago, there was a cruel and ruthless tyrant who unified this continent. Due to the great amount of blood spilled, the gods cast a curse upon him. Heaven punished him. He would die at the hands of his beloved, and his descendants would not be spared. So all the children born into that family learned indifference from a very young age. They didn't dare to love others. They could only grow old, alone in their world, not even seeing their closest relatives. And this country has another cruel custom. If one wants to be crowned prince, he must stab his own father's chest. Because only in this way can it be demonstrated that the future emperor will never be soft. This drama of brothers facing each other has been played out in this family for 500 years. The second prince wanted to continue, but he saw that his sister in bed already showed an expression of sadness. Although the little princess didn't want to worry her brother, the expression in her eyes betrayed her. The second prince regretted it a little. "I regret telling my sister such a sad story." But his heart felt comforted. It turned out that feeling loved could be so happy. It was a warmth he had never experienced before. After all, even his own mother detested him. He had always used a carefree attitude to numb himself. Only in this way did he have the courage to continue living. But now it's different. They found his sister. The curse that had haunted the family for centuries was finally lifted. He no longer had to suppress his feelings for his family, for this one and only sister. He feels affection and gratitude. Rather, he wanted to pamper and protect her like a jewel. "My sister disappeared for 10 years. She fell into slavery and suffered greatly. With great difficulty, my brothers found her. The three princes tried to compensate her in every possible way, not only because of the unbreakable bond between siblings, but also because of the guilt and debt they felt towards her. The little princess's mother was the emperor's favorite concubine. Even with the curse that bound them, they loved each other unconditionally. But happiness was short-lived. The instability on the border forced the emperor to go to war. He had to temporarily separate from his pregnant wife. He finally won the battle, but upon returning victorious, what awaited him was the cold tomb of his beloved Eop and the terrible news of his daughter's disappearance. And the one who committed all these crimes was the prince's mother. The story is halfway through. The second prince looked at his sister with concern, but discovered that the girl had already fallen asleep. At night, the little princess dreamed of her mother. The newly arrived maiden is gentle and beautiful. She says to her daughter, "You were born of love." The little princess smiles happily. But the second prince's expression becomes increasingly serious. The culprit in the death of the consort princess is now in the palace. And the fact that the little princess has been found, but he made it public, even if he trusted the knight's abilities, he didn't want his sister to suffer. The second prince couldn't help but blame his older brother for his lack of consideration, although the eldest prince couldn't be entirely blamed either. Anyone who saw his sister, emaciated back then, would have wanted to compensate her in every possible way. The second prince hoped he had exaggerated, but he didn't know that danger was approaching stealthily. The little princess got up very early the next day. Last night was the best night's sleep she'd had since entering the palace. She, who was afraid of the dark, wished her brother could accompany her every night. But she also warned herself not to be greedy. "I don't have classes today." The little princess decided to go play with Sunday. She lifted her little face expectantly. She directly asked Colin about Dior's residence. Seeing this, the man lowered his head nervously. According to the great prince's plans, that child should now be cleaning in the storage room. He and the princess, although they were childhood friends, now their positions are very different. Colin feared that the girl, due to the extreme, would make some irrational decision. Just as he was looking for an excuse to evade the situation, he saw that the girl's eyes had turned an unsettling green. The next second, a huge black shadow pounced on the girl from behind. The little princess screamed in fright, but upon turning around, she saw her brother's hateful smile. And then, the second prince went even further and pinched her white cheeks. After all this commotion, the cake carefully prepared for Dio ended up scattered on the floor. Seeing his sister's sad little face, the man decided to take her out of the palace to buy some more. But neither of them expected to encounter an unexpected guest at the bakery. Although her brother bought her cakes, she didn't dare to try even a bite, because in the slave camp, any waste of food was punished with brutal beatings by her master. Those nightmarish memories are already engraved in her soul. Although she knows her brother won't hurt her, she is still afraid that he will hate her. The little princess swallowed sadly. She can't eat such a big cake by herself. The girl hesitated for a moment, and finally dared to start. Seeing her sister's reserved attitude, the second prince feels pity and helplessness. So that his younger sister could eat in peace, he rented the entire bakery. You had already told me that this child eats very little. He thought it was because she didn't like the palace food, but she doesn't even eat cake, which all children love. He couldn't help but wonder the reason. However, the little princess asked him with all sincerity, "Will I be beaten if I don't eat it all?" Upon hearing this, the second prince felt a lump in his throat. Moved, he stroked his sister's head and said, "Don't worry, what you don't eat, we'll take with us." With that said, he cut a small piece and put it on the girl's plate. With her brother's assurance, the obedient little princess tried a bite. The sweet cream melted in her mouth. It was even richer than her brother had told her. The girl's eyes filled with happiness, and the second prince responded with an affectionate smile. This child is perfect in everything, only she is too thin. One can imagine such a life in a slave camp, with constant hunger. He only felt compassion in his eyes. The brothers enjoyed their time alone. But just then, an unexpected guest with red hair suddenly appeared. Elegantly, she bowed to the two of them. The very sensitive little princess noticed her brother's irritation. The second prince really didn't like that woman. This Miss Viola was known in noble circles for being a hypocritical goody two-shoes. Wherever he was, surely nothing good would happen. The young man impatiently got down from his chair. He didn't expect the red-haired lady to be so brazen. She invited the little princess to her party with feigned shyness. Her enthusiasm was hard to refuse. The second prince's expression worsened. He sneered coldly, unmasking Viola's little trick. "You're approaching Chloe to show off your connections at the party, aren't you? Forget it." A flash of cruelty shone in the young man's eyes. The red-haired girl tried to explain something more, but he scared her into fleeing in terror. The crisis was temporarily resolved. The second prince was still not entirely at ease. The moment his sister's identity was revealed, her fate to live in constant danger was sealed. With three brothers with extreme possessiveness towards their sisters, how will it feel? The little princess couldn't imagine that her brothers would be jealous because of her. Sunset. The second prince strolled down the street, holding his younger sister's hand. Their silhouettes stretched infinitely long under the sunset light, like in an oil painting. Time seemed to have stopped. However, at that moment, a familiar figure suddenly approached. The great yellow prince naturally took the little princess in his arms and looked with displeasure at his younger brother, who was behind them. The second prince, for his part, remained indifferent. "My older brother worries too much. I only took her out for a little walk." But before he could finish, Da Huangzi had already left with his sister, leaving him to howl miserably in the cold street. In the carriage, the little princess asked Da Huangzi anxiously, "Why did you leave Brother Jed?" He didn't expect this question to unleash the older brother's jealousy. Brother Jed. The man silently repeated the girl's address. A barely perceptible hint of disappointment flashed in his eyes. Why doesn't his sister call him brother? His voice was very low. The little princess tilted her head, puzzled. Meanwhile, the first prince had already tactfully changed the subject. "It must be that he hasn't behaved well enough. His sister only calls him Your Highness, which distances him." But just thinking about his sister calling that annoying little brother, Chester feels very uncomfortable. On the way, the two talked a lot about the fun things that happened during the day. The carriage slowly approached the imperial city. The little princess enthusiastically admired the scenery along the way, but suddenly she saw a stone tower that appeared out of nowhere. Blinking in disbelief. However, the tower disappeared before her very eyes. The girl thought she had imagined it. She didn't know that tower was him, the elusive Sanhei. He finally returned to the palace. The eldest prince had to leave first, and the little princess couldn't wait to look for Dio. He carrying the cake he had just bought, asked a knight to guide him. Thinking that he would soon see his old companion, his steps became lighter. However, the expected reunion did not arrive. Upon opening the door, the little princess saw the young man working. The boy laboriously lifted a mop taller than himself, while the overseer beside him kept increasing his workload. Seeing this, the little princess's eyes instantly turned red. She felt pity and rage at the same time. She finally decided to go look for His Highness the Crown Prince. She couldn't allow Dio to continue suffering. The boy who always protected him is reunited with him, but performing the most menial work in the palace, sweat soaking his hair, and the foreman in charge kept giving him work. Seeing this, the little princess's heart ached. She remembered when she was in the slave camp, the boy protected her again and again. Even if he was beaten or punished for her, he never complained. But now she is a princess, and I can't even protect my old friends. The girl felt sad and guilty. For the first time, she mustered her courage and went to look for her brothers. Meanwhile, the two princes were discussing in the study how to protect their sister. Since the day they found the little princess, their mother had already made new moves. Just when the two were worried, the little princess had already flung open the study door in a fury. The two brothers were stunned by their little sister's commotion. The crown prince thought his sister had been mistreated outside. He looked coldly at the knight beside him. Clin was also very frightened. Luckily, the little princess spoke in time. She asked her brother if what he had said before, that she could ask for anything she wanted, still stood. The two brothers nodded in unison. The second prince affectionately stroked her head. It was the first time his sister had asked for something on her own initiative. Even if it were the stars in the sky, he would find a way to reach them. And the first prince didn't plan to miss this opportunity to improve his image. He leaned down and crouched in front of his sister, gently encouraging her to speak slowly. Seeing the unconditional affection her brother showed her, thinking of Dio's pitiful situation, the little princess felt even worse. She asked anxiously, "Why don't I have to do hard work?" While Dio has to work so hard, doing chores. She wanted Dio to be as happy as she was. However, before she could finish speaking, Da Huangzi interrupted her with his voice. "Sister, you are still very naive. The reason we don't allow the little princess to get close to that boy is because we fear that her kindness will be used by malicious people. Even the closest relatives can be blinded by self-interest, much less a friend with no blood ties." He didn't dare to risk his sister's safety. Meanwhile, the little princess enthusiastically told them everything Dio had done for her. Seeing that her brothers still disagreed, the girl turned her back angrily. She liked her brothers just the way they were, so that they wouldn't reject her. She strived to be an obedient child. But in Dio's case, she didn't want to give in. Seeing that his sister's eyes had filled with sadness, the brothers felt the same sorrow. Finally, they looked at each other and agreed to the girl's request. Dio could be adopted by a noble family, but on the condition that they have to spend a year without seeing each other. The girl he likes has become a princess, and he is still a humble servant. Although he is no longer a slave, he is still not worthy of her. He remembers the first time they met. He had just been sold by his mother. His small body curled up on a cold straw mat. His heart was full of hatred. He only wanted to end his life once and for all. It was also that day that he met the only ray of light in his life. The girl's golden hair was as bright as the sun. On that night when he almost starved to death, a piece of bread warmed his entire childhood. Back then, he even thought the girl was foolish. If the master finds out, he'll surely kill us. So what? Afterward, in countless days when they warmed themselves together, he secretly saved her. Although the girl always considered herself the older sister for being taller, protecting her had become the boy's instinct. Dio was lying in bed, remembering the moments with the little princess. Didi doesn't regret attacking with the girl. He laments his own ineptitude. Seeing the little princess live happily makes him happy from the bottom of his heart. It would be false to say he doesn't envy her. But he has never resented her, but their identities are now very different. He shouldn't have bothered her. The girl's hard-won happiness. Thinking this, Dio closed his eyes in despair. However, at that moment, a series of rapid knocks sounded on the door outside the room. Dio thought it was the little princess coming to see him. He jumped out of bed, but upon opening the door, what he saw was the noble second prince. Disappointment was evident in the young man's eyes. Just as he was packing his luggage, he saw Qing. A cute little head peeked out from behind the young man. The girl anxiously pushed her brother, who was blocking the door. She wanted to go see Dio quickly. Unexpectedly, the second prince not only didn't move, but shouted, "Get out!" and aggressively struck the boy on the shoulder. Fortunately, Dio, accustomed to physical labor, was agile. He generously dodged the young man's attack, but someone grabbed his head. In the next second, the second prince reprimanded the others in a threatening tone. He said what he wants is for his sister to have one more foolish friend, implying that the boy shouldn't have any illusions. Dio felt great bitterness. He never thought of taking advantage of the girl, but with his current identity, it was expected that they would suspect him. Seeing this, "Little princess, I thought your brothers wouldn't accept Dio." He was so worried he almost cried, but in the next second, her brothers suddenly stepped aside and even told the boy not to dare bother their brother. "If you do and I find out, you're dead." He closed the door stealthily. His younger sister had a boyfriend. His brothers, instead of preventing it, provided them with a romantic space to be alone. However, as soon as the door closed, a strange awkwardness filled the room. Dio, looking at the little princess in her elegant dress, felt insecurity engulf him again. He could no longer behave as before, joking around with people regardless of their status. They were both silent for a while. Finally, the girl was the first to speak. She asked Dio if they could chat in his room. If he didn't want to, she would leave. The boy's cheeks flushed slightly. How could he refuse? But before he could finish, the girl ran excitedly towards him. The little princess's face radiated happiness, as if she had endless things to tell. She shared nonstop with the boy her life and experiences from this time. Dio listened attentively, as if they were children again, telling each other everything. Suddenly, the little princess remembered there was something important she hadn't said. Her expression turned serious instantly. "You want to leave here?" Upon hearing those words, Dio's face changed as well. That was what he feared most, separating from the little princess. "Although I know the princess doesn't lack guards to protect her, still, I want to stay in the palace, even as a simple servant. Just for being able to see her from afar occasionally, I would already feel satisfied." The boy's gaze was full of sadness. The little princess quickly explained that she didn't wish for Dio to leave, but she had devised a plan with her brothers. If Dio became the adopted son of a noble, they could continue to be friends. Not only would he not have to do dirty and exhausting work, but he would receive an elite education. In the future, he could thus spend more time with her in the palace. But this required them to separate for a while. Dio's heart was full of conflict and sadness. Not for a second did he want to separate from the little princess, but this was his only opportunity. After much thought, the boy finally agreed to leave the palace temporarily. He advised the girl to take care of herself. The little princess nodded obediently. At the same time, he also said that when Dio started reading and writing, they could write letters to each other. By then, it would be like seeing each other, and she hoped Dio wouldn't despise him for his ugliness. After saying that, the little princess placed her hand on the back of the boy's hand, as if it were a silence. He loved Dio like his best friend for life. In the past, they supported each other to overcome those difficult times. From now on, no matter the obstacles, nothing will break their bond. How clever can a girl be? With just a few words, the Empire praised her most severe teacher. In the blink of an eye, a whole year has passed since the little princess returned to the palace. During this year, she enjoyed an affection she had never known before. Her busy brothers fought over her daily. The gifts they sent her not even half a castle could contain, and her father wrote to her every other day, fearing to miss every moment of his daughter's growth. But even though everyone pampered her, the little princess maintained her docile and kind nature, never reprimanding the servants, and always thinking of others. And she was also very diligent and studious. So in this short year, she won everyone's affection. The second prince always calls her his little lucky star because she really brought good luck to this country. And now, the little princess has completed her basic studies so that she can become a more qualified member of royalty. The first prince got his sister, overnight, the most renowned scholar in the empire, as a teacher. Chloe had already heard that this professor was peculiar, but she didn't expect that in their first meeting he would leave such a deep impression. She barely opened the door. The girl heard a faint snoring sound among the books. From what she could see, the professor didn't seem to have any intention of waking up, so the little princess approached timidly. She asked the professor anxiously if class should start already, but the young man, already awake, told her that in the empire, the first class doesn't happen. unless the little princess can convince him. This is the first test he sets for the girl. His previous students were not. They didn't dare to speak. He simply ordered them around arrogantly. However, the little princess's response pleasantly surprised him. The girl said that she sincerely wanted to learn, that she wanted to travel, and as a member of royalty, contribute to the country. Lar felt very satisfied with the answer. He also corrected the little princess on a couple of basic concepts. He told the girl that what she was going to learn was not just what the book said, but more importantly, how to manipulate people. With that said, the young man spread out a huge map and said that this was Aska, the entirety of the empire ruled by the Ni family. It is difficult for a single family to manage it, so we need the help of close nobles. Although Ral is very satisfied with the little princess's intelligence and kindness, but sooner or later the girl will have to learn to use authority to suppress others. This is the first lesson he teaches the little princess. There is much more to learn. He worries that the girl might not be able to bear it. Meanwhile, the little princess with full confidence expresses, "No matter how hard it is, I will grit my teeth and persist. I want to be the pride of my brothers." Seeing the girl's motivation, Lar maliciously took out a complicated list of vocabulary in an ancient language. A cunning glint crossed his eyes. Today's task, 500 repetitions of each word. When the little princess reacted, a wail echoed through the palace. The cub, for his sister, would give his life, but he only dares to keep his love in the depths of his heart because he believes he is not worthy of her. Chloe is a high-ranking princess, the empire's only hope, and he, a poor little thing abandoned by his mother. His love for her is humble, down to the dust. Even just catching a glimpse of her from afar, he was already completely satisfied. He believed that the girl only felt friendship for him, but he knew that during those 365 days of separation, the little princess didn't stop thinking about him for a single day. Since Chloe learned to read and write, she wrote to Dio constantly. Whether it was curious news from the palace or simply what she saw and heard each day, she wrote it all in her letters. This gave her the illusion that Dio was still by her side. But she rarely received a reply from the boy, and this day was no different. The little princess lowered her head sadly. Seeing this, Colin hurried to apologize for his brother. Dio is probably very busy, letting the princess laugh. In the girl's mind, she couldn't help but picture the boy seriously practicing calligraphy. It turned out that all of this was not her illusion. The little princess immediately burst into laughter. Her eyes also turned a sweet pink color. The one-year appointment she made with Dio. Only a few days remained. The girl told herself to hold on a little longer. However, the next day, Colin mysteriously told her that he would take her somewhere. The girl thought it was a surprise, secretly prepared by her brothers, but she was surprised to find that the carriage was heading to a castle hidden in the forest. Still through the heavy gate, he could hear the little mischief of the children. Only Colin's loud scolding maintained a brief calm, a little princess's heart filled with anticipation. He knew his beloved Dio was here. Sure enough, turning her head, she saw that familiar figure. A tailored black suit made him look mature and elegant. Only a year has passed, but Dio's aura has changed drastically. And then Mira's intimate and natural interaction with his brothers. The little princess was sincerely happy for him, but at that moment, Dio also noticed the noise at the door. He turned to look. Everything around him seemed to stop. Their eyes met. Only the two of them remained in the room, the beating of their hearts in unison. She saw the young man approach her smiling. With elegant and refined manners, like the most handsome prince from a fairy tale, with one hand over his chest. He introduced himself again to the girl tenderly. Just as they had agreed, they would be friends again with a new identity. How handsome can a tender boy become when he grows up? Only 1 year. The little princess will no longer be able to be the older sister. Upon seeing each other again, Chloe feels as happy as a flower. The boy she likes is finally living his life. But what she doesn't like is that now Theo is half a head taller than her. The boy has grown as if he had a catalyst. The girl strains and stands on tiptoes. Still, she can't reach Dio. If it weren't for the fact that this year he has also changed his clothes, she would already doubt if she has grown at all. The more the little princess thinks, the more frustrated she feels. If this continues, she can only be the little sister. But thinking about it, for all these years, it has always been Dio who has protected her. More than a younger brother, the boy seemed like her personal guardian knight. Next, the little princess, guided by Dio, began to tour the Duke's mansion. At first, her younger brothers wanted to follow them as chaperones. But before they could say anything, Dio abruptly rejected them. They left Colin alone in the living room. After so long, they had so much to talk about. Dio told the girl that he had signed up for the knight's trials. "This year, I have been practicing fencing seriously. If he becomes a knight, he can be a royal bodyguard." Seeing the young man's sincere smile, the little princess was surprised by the jolt. Then she joked, "Could it be that you want to be my personal bodyguard?" He didn't expect a casual joke to touch the young man's feelings so precisely. Dio's cheeks flushed instantly. His gaze was evasive, but he still nodded, blushing. Now it's the little princess's turn to blush, but if everything goes well, they will really be able to be together openly. Immediately afterward, the two arrived at Dio's room. The little princess was captivated by the large number of toys. These novel gadgets, she had never seen them before. The young man generously told her that if she liked them, she could take them, but the little princess shook her head, showing her sensibility. They already had many toys. It's just that seeing them, she couldn't help but remember what happened before she was 10 years old. However, those days of suffering had already passed. Both he and Dio had a new life. The little princess continued excitedly, searching for a treasure in the young man's room. Soon she found a box with an elegant design. After opening it, she found colorful ribbons. Seeing them, Dio explained that in this country, knights tie ribbons to their garments to express the memory and blessings of their families. He took a golden ribbon from the case and reached the little princess's palm. If he could, he hoped that one day a girl would tie one around his neck with her own hands. In an instant, Chloe had the feeling that he had proposed marriage, but even so, he accepted. Blushing, her eldest brother, whom she loved the most, was going to get married, and he didn't plan to tell his sister. The little princess discovered that her brother was spending less and less time with her. Moreover, unfamiliar girls frequently entered and left his chambers. Moved by curiosity, the girl asked Professor Lar. It was then that she learned that her brother did all that for her. According to the laws of the empire, only after the crown prince marries, only within the palace, are other ladies of the court allowed entry. And now that the little princess has grown up, the great prince has been forced to pretend to select concubines to mislead spies. He has no intention of marrying and having children in his life. Instead of these unimportant trivialities, would you rather be by your sister's side? However, because during this time the great yellow prince's division spell, the important task of taking care of the little princess fell into the hands of the second yellow prince. Compared to the serious older brother, the irritating second brother always manages to enrage his sister to the point of making her tremble. That day, the girl was seriously copying the text she had just learned, but the second prince suddenly told her that she had written a spelling error. "It's rare to see my brother so serious." The little princess quickly began searching her exercise sheet, but in the next second, the young man burst into laughter and mockingly told his sister that she had fallen for it again. Seeing her brother's malicious smile, the little princess became very angry and frowned. In an angry but tender voice, she told her brother that he studies a lot. "I just want to be a better princess." After saying that, the girl continued studying diligently, but suddenly, she felt a pain in her nose. She covered her little face sadly and heard her brother's gentle voice. "Even if you don't try hard, your brother will like you anyway." The young man's smile was incredibly warm. Reaching straight to her heart, she murmured, "Me too. Even if my brother is a liar, I like him." The girl's voice held a slight complaint, but she couldn't hide her joy. But before she could finish, someone lifted her into their arms. The little princess couldn't see the expression of the person carrying her, but she could feel his fear. In her brother's trembling hands, she asked doubtfully about Jay's brother, and heard the young man's muffled voice. "Little one, you have to grow slowly, so you can stay by my side longer. Time, and I still want to invite you to dance the first dance of the ball. There are so many things I want to do with you, so you mustn't grow too fast. Don't leave our side." Her brother's voice broke, and the little princess's heart also shrank. Looking at those eyes that turned green with unease, the girl unconsciously pinched his nose. She told her brother that even if he chased her away, she wouldn't leave. The atmosphere inexplicably became cheerful again. The second prince lamented his loss of composure. He pinched his sister's cheeks and then asked her if she had seen anyone strange lately. The little princess was stunned by the question. He has no idea that the strange person his second brother is talking about is the mysterious third prince. However, she overheard that her third brother's mobile tower is near the palace, so the little princess decides to go look for her brother. To find her brother, the little princess ventures into the magic tower of the forest. She had barely opened the door when she fell into a strange black hole. The fear of losing her balance made her close her eyes in fright. However, the expected pain didn't come. She landed sitting on a soft meadow. An endless sea of flowers covered the entire space. The little princess looked around in confusion. At that precise moment, a white crow flew out from among the flowers. Its pure white feathers shone in the sun. The girl instinctively covered her eyes, but the little crow didn't seem scared. Fluttering, it landed on the girl's hand. The little princess watched it curiously. Its lake blue eyes contrasted with its snow-white feathers. Seeing it like this, it looks a bit like her brother's. However, in the next second, the previously peaceful space suddenly distorted. The ground opened into a terrible crack. Although the little princess was scared, she tightly pressed the little bird against her chest. As she fled, he gently comforted her. "Don't be afraid, I'll take you to a safe place." But he didn't expect this little crow to start talking. He told the girl that the earthquake had been caused by invaders outside the magic tower, that if they didn't stop it, the missing energy would very likely end the girl's life. Afterward, he then freed himself from the little princess's arms. "Sleep a little." He had barely finished speaking when the girl fell into a deep sleep. In the instant she was about to fall, soft hands pulled her into his lap. The crow, who was clumsy before, had turned into a melancholic, gentle, white-haired prince. And he is none other than the princess's mysterious older brother, the third prince. He, like his sister, detests those color-changing eyes. That's why he has always wandered in the guise of a crow upon learning that his sister had been found. He also secretly watched her from the window sometimes, but due to extreme fear, the third prince couldn't introduce himself. However, shortly after, this beautiful young woman accidentally wandered into his magic tower. The girl's inner world was so beautiful that he couldn't help but want to get closer. However, when he saw her clearly, he discovered that the girl was his sister, lost years ago. Just as he was preparing to get a little closer to her, the mobile tower suffered an unprecedented attack, but the two nearby auras felt very familiar to him. If he wasn't mistaken, whoever was hitting the wall must be his other two brothers. The little princess ventured to look for her brothers and fell into a coma. The collapse of the mobile tower caused considerable damage to her body. The crown prince regretted it very much. He shouldn't have destroyed the wall as recklessly as his younger brother. But when he discovered that his sister had disappeared, he could no longer control his reason. Luckily, the third prince saved my sister. Otherwise, he would never forgive himself in his life. The first prince looked affectionately at the sleeping girl. He wanted to take her from his brother's arms. But the third prince had no intention of letting her go. "That is our sister." After getting an affirmative answer, Sinian's eyes turned golden, representing happiness. She really is their little lucky star. She is their treasure, in whom they can trust to love. The young man carefully protected her in his arms. The collapse of the tower continued. He quickly carried his sister to a safe place. The little princess sleepily opened her eyes. The third prince watched over her with infinite tenderness, a gentle face, even more beautiful than any girl he had seen before. The girl murmured unconsciously, "How pretty!" The young man was stunned. He rarely met people in person just because he had an appearance that made him feel inferior, especially this white hair that foreshadows misfortune. Even his own mother hated him. That's why he silently transformed into a crow. And now, his sister not only doesn't despise his appearance, but sincerely praises him. Thinking about this, the third prince wishes even more to protect his sweet sister, and the little princess is very curious about her new brother. She asks him if he used magic to turn into a crow. The young man, who had barely been cheerful for a moment, fell back into disillusionment. He was going to be treated like a monster. However, in the next second, he saw his sister lift her little face seriously. Her clear eyes were full of admiration. She asked him enthusiastically how her brother had done it. A wave of warmth flooded the young man's chest. He finally understood why his sister's inner world was so beautiful that the girl was kinder than he had imagined. But just then, the second prince suddenly arrived. He placed a hand on the young man's head. "Unless something important happened, my younger brother doesn't even remember to come home." He asks the third prince the reason for his return. As he expected, his younger brother's prediction is about to come true. Their father is about to die. The little princess was internally injured protecting her brother. By the time she fully recovers, a week will have passed. During this time, the third prince has been tirelessly taking care of her. The young man gave his sister shiny gems. He would turn into a little bird to amuse her. That day, as usual, the third prince transformed back into a little crow to visit his sister. Fluttering, he landed on the window. The little princess, excited, approached, but in the next second, an opposing face appeared at the window. Chloe looked at her brother with resignation. She had warned him many times already, but her brother always said yes, and the next time he would sneak in through the window again. That's why they had both received countless reprimands from the head maid, and this time, to their bad luck, someone had seen them. The head of the city activated the patient persuasion mode. The little princess could only apologize awkwardly to the side. He knows that Linda does it for his own good, as a member of royalty. Each of his movements must be perfect, otherwise, unknowingly, they will become the laughingstock of social circles. Seeing his sister being reprimanded because of him, the third prince didn't feel very well either. You could see his white wings trembling slightly. An adorable and clumsy crow perched on the girl's shoulder. His round little head bobbed from time to time. His sister's fever was like a pout. More than being a prince of the empire, he preferred to be his sister's exclusive crow. The head maid has come to deliver something important to the princess. Her palace has been completed. Chloe carefully receives the key. Besides joy, she feels very flattered. Building a palace must have cost a lot, and the sapphire necklace her second brother gave her last time, I suppose that won't be cheap either. The third prince noticed her worry. He quickly changed the subject, proposing to the little princess that they visit the newly built palace, as the eldest brother and second brother are busy with the cemetery. The task of accompanying her fell to the third prince. The two walked down the corridor. The long and narrow space reminded the little princess of the night she arrived at the palace. It was the same path. Back then she was terrified and lost. The infinite darkness almost devoured her. Luckily, that day she met her brother Jade. It was her brother who calmed her anguish. He gave her an unprecedented sense of security. And now she is no longer afraid, because at the end of the road is her new home. He used to be a nameless slave of the weak. His red eyes were considered a symbol of bad omen. And now he not only has 3 princes who pamper and love him like a brother, but he also has a new home of his own. Lin, countless toys almost reached the ceiling. The maids even dressed his little dolls in new clothes. The little princess gave a grateful smile. Tana immediately blushed, embarrassed. Everyone in the palace loves this gentle and kind little mistress. So when they heard that the princess was going to build a new palace, they came to help spontaneously. Afterward, the girl visited some beautifully decorated rooms. She was a little tired, but realized she hadn't seen half of it yet. So she asked Kana, who was beside her. But she didn't expect the maid to tell her, the entire palace has 100 rooms. The little princess felt overwhelmed. Her old room was already quite luxurious. But the luxury of this palace was hundreds of times greater. How much would all this have cost? She almost didn't dare to continue exploring. She raised her head, but saw the maid's disheartened expression, thinking of the effort they had made for her. The sweet princess had no choice but to suggest going to the library for a stroll. But before taking a few steps, she saw a familiar figure through the window. The little princess trembled uncontrollably. If she wasn't mistaken, this must be Milan. When she was in the slave camp, Milan never stopped mistreating him. Back then, he was a nameless slave of the weak. In the camp, he was worth less than the master's dog. Milan was different. He was a slave with a name, so his main job was to supervise and punish them. The little princess still remembers that once, for being a little slow, Miriam gave him a hard slap. Back then, she envied that Miriam had her own name and could wear clean clothes, but she never imagined that arrogant girl. It's incredible that she has come to the palace as a guard. Remembering those unpleasant memories again, the little princess's eyes were expressionless. They turned a sad red, but that man seemed thin. Maybe she was wrong. The girl comforted herself silently and went to the library to find a book. The story in the book is very interesting. The little princess forgets, for a moment, the unpleasant experience she just had, but just at that moment, she suddenly hears your conversation downstairs about the party you are going to organize for her. The girl is surprised. How is it possible that she knows nothing about something so important? Lunchtime just arrived. She decided to go ask her brothers, to wait for her brothers to eat. The little princess often had stomach pains from hunger, so this time, it wasn't even mealtime yet. And the three princes were already sitting at the table in unison. They feared that their sister's stomach illness would reappear. Of course, there is an even more important reason. Today is the first time they are dining in their sister's palace. The three brothers have dressed especially formally. The second brother has put on the cloak he wore at his coronation, and the third brother is covered in glittering jewels. Only the crown prince appeared relatively discreet, but if you look closely, you'll know he's wearing a white suit he would never wear under normal circumstances. As soon as the princess entered, she was surprised by her brother's flashy attire. The three of them looked like they hadn't come to dinner, but to compete for royal favor. I just found out that my brothers were only celebrating her new palace, to the little princess's uncontrollable joy. Over these years, he had already gotten used to his brothers constantly surprising him. Whether it was expensive gifts or affectionate company, he was already satisfied. But the more his brothers did this, the more uneasy he felt. He didn't want to unilaterally accept his family's affection. He also wanted to do something for others. So when they mentioned that a banquet was going to be held, the little princess impatiently went to look for her brothers. She wanted, as a member of the Ascani family, to attend as a member. It will be her personal debut in high society, and the beginning of her participation in government affairs with her brothers. Thinking about this, the young woman proposed that he personally take charge of organizing the banquet. However, the crown prince rejected the idea without a second thought. He didn't want his sister to take on so soon. Taking responsibility for imperial affairs and preparing the banquet is quite exhausting. He fears that his sister alone won't be able to handle it, but the second prince doesn't think so. If it had been 6 months ago, he wouldn't have approved either, but since he saw the little princess's progress in her studies, he no longer thinks of opposing it. This child's ability and learning talent are much more than he imagined. He believed that his sister could complete the task successfully, but the most urgent thing was to find an experienced teacher for the girl. None of the Unity princes thought of the right person. At that moment, the little princess spoke suddenly. She seriously proposed that Colin's mother instruct him. She was a highly respected marchioness. She held a very influential position throughout the social circle. Of course, he also had his own motives. He missed Dio a little. Before, his brothers thought their little sister needed protection, but when the little princess started working, they discovered that their sister's work capacity was truly impressive. Every movement of the girl is befitting royalty. Even the way she takes tea is perfect. However, not a trace of aristocratic arrogance can be seen in him. His respectful and humble treatment of his elders is admirable. It's hard for anyone not to like such a little princess. Even the stern Nigelford has nothing but praise for him. If this girl were his daughter, and he looks at his eldest daughter, so useless, he couldn't help but scold her. The three chatted very lively. Moliao, the little princess, explained her purpose to Lady Nigel. She wished that the lady could guide her in preparing a perfect banquet. The girl appears serious and commanding. Lady Nigel is also willing to take on the role of teacher. She patiently lists all the preparations for the little princess. Meals and snacks can be left to others, but the guest list must be personally selected by the organizer. The little princess's priority is to understand the political stance of each family and try to invite families close to royalty. If she mistakenly invites an opposing family, there is a risk of an accident occurring. After listening to the lady's careful explanation, the little princess nodded humbly. Emily, to the side, suddenly thought of someone. He recommended to the girl that she never invite the head of the Olaf consortium, even though that man was someone the nobles competed to attract. He never attended any banquets. Inviting him would surely embarrass the royal family. The little princess silently kept this in her heart, but this consortium head of mysterious identity aroused the girl's curiosity. Next, Lady Nigel explained some basic precautions to her. The little princess noted them with great attention, seeing the girl's attitude as if facing a great enemy. Lady Nigel couldn't help but comfort her. As the only princess of the empire, her invitation is an honor, even for the whole family. And if she can't manage, both she and Emily can help at any time. The princess greatly appreciated the lady's words, but still wanted to try it herself first. When the lesson ended, the young woman got directly into the carriage back to the palace. There was little time left for the banquet preparations, and she also didn't dare to disturb Dio while he was training with the sword. Actually, after arriving at the Marquis's mansion, the first thing she did was sneak into the training grounds. Little princess, tiptoeing, wanted to give Dio a surprise, but she didn't expect that, as soon as she approached, The young man, as if he had foreseen it, turned around. His handsome face showed surprise. That made the little princess feel embarrassed. Her little heart beat faster and faster. Her cheeks burned uncontrollably. That strange feeling was like being sick. That's why, at that moment, she made an excuse. She escaped. The little princess didn't yet know she was in love. As she wandered, the carriage shook violently. The third prince immediately took human form and protected his sister in his arms. But he himself was injured, his head broken and bleeding. The brother protected his sister in his arms. Blood clouded his vision. The little princess raised her head and saw a large patch of blood on her brother's body. That wasn't a color a human should have. But right now she can't afford to think about that. She wants to help her brother check the wound. But in the next second, someone grabs the girl's wrist. "I'm fine, this doesn't taste like anyone." The third prince's voice contained suppressed pain. But even so, he didn't forget to comfort his sister. Seeing this scene, the little princess almost burst into tears. But in this wasteland, where can we find a doctor? At that moment, the carriage door suddenly opened. They brought good news and bad news. The good news was that they had only run over a stray dog. Once the carriage was repaired, they could set off again. The bad news was that the carriage wheels were completely broken. Repairing them would take a long time. The little princess looked at her brother, bewildered. "His wound is still bleeding. He won't last long like this." At that moment, a stranger suddenly approached. He said he belonged to the Olaf Trading Company, which could help them unconditionally with no other alternative. The little princess decided to take a risk. Go meet this mysterious head of the company. But the girl never imagined that the man rumored to dominate the market was only 16 years old, and he wasn't as eccentric as others said either. The young man's peach blossom eyes showed a kind smile. The little princess only exchanged glances with him and couldn't help but blush. Afterward, Lord Azul gently helped the girl into the carriage. Basically, he had already guessed the girl's identity. The color-changing eyes, plus the third prince's guards. It's hard not to guess, but the young man is in no hurry to reveal the girl's identity. He wants to know if this person will be as unpleasant as other nobles. However, the little princess's performance completely exceeded his expectations. The girl showed not a hint of noble arrogance. Each of her words and actions was mature and serene. She didn't look like a 12 or 13-year-old girl at all. However, when she became affectionate with her brother, she would become adorable and innocent again. That little princess is simply charming. So when the girl invited him to the ball, the young man didn't think twice and accepted. He knew what doing so was. It was equivalent to publicly declaring his political stance. But he simply didn't want to sadden the little princess. The two hit it off instantly. Without realizing it, the carriage had already arrived at the palace. The little princess said goodbye to Blue Ear sadly. But the girl didn't know that upon returning to the palace, an even greater danger awaited her. It turns out that the little princess's true identity was that of the revered one's reincarnation. It is also the key to breaking his brother's curse. After returning from the marquise's mansion, the little princess went to the library to look up information about the various families. Meanwhile, she also found several records about the royal family. The curious girl went to ask Professor Lar. Then the man told her an ancient story. Legend has it that the ancestors of Ascania were two royal brothers from Zadar, whose throne was usurped by their uncle. The two young men were forced into exile. The brother, a brave and skilled warrior, while the sister was so fragile she couldn't even defend herself. However, this seemingly ordinary princess became the key to resurrection because the girl possessed a special ability. She could communicate with monsters. At first, no one paid attention to that useless power, until a powerful ancient dragon joined the battle. Finally, the warriors achieved victory by a narrow margin. The brothers also succeeded. The current Baluk Empire was founded, but the story doesn't end there. The emperor's blind expansion killed his sister, and that is the reason why the ancient dragon cast a curse on the royal family. Master Lal stopped there. And in his eyes, there was an emotion the little princess didn't understand. That look is the same one he had when she missed Dio. But a second later, the man's expression returned to normal. He told the girl that dragons were not entirely evil beings, that they were simply very lonely, and that only those chosen by a dragon could use magic. This made the little princess remember a fairy tale she had read before. The little dragon in the story was so lonely that he kidnapped the princess, but unexpectedly, the kind princess didn't blame him, but offered to be his friend. The story had two endings. One is the dragon abandoned by the princess, who leaves with the knight, and the other is the dragon, who lives happily ever after with the princess. The girl knight prefers the second ending. That dragon always reminds her of herself. Because of the color of her eyes, they consider her a freak. It's not her fault, but it became the reason why others hurt her. The girl told the teacher her thoughts. However, he didn't know who Master Lar in front of him was, an ancient dragon with a hidden identity, and that Hu herself was the reincarnation of the sister who killed this princess. In the past, he is the only man in the world who can communicate with monsters. Master. Only he can summon the powerful ancestral dragon, although the power, already latent within her, has not yet awakened. The nobles of neighboring countries can no longer restrain themselves. Obtaining the dragon's help means obtaining unlimited power, so they wish to kidnap the little princess to experiment on her. It's a pity they don't know how powerful the princess's three brothers are. Days ago, the first prince had already intercepted their return. So from that day on, the second prince has been guarding the little princess's palace every night. Even if the next day he has to train the new recruits, he is unwilling to entrust the protection of his sister to anyone. And the third prince constantly stayed glued to his sister. In his crow form, he watched alertly around her. At the slightest movement, he immediately sent a message to her other brothers. So although the palace was always on alert, the little princess didn't notice anything. That day, as usual, the little princess went to the training grounds to look for her brother Jade. However, just as she reached the entrance, a flash of light attacked her. Luckily, Colin's knight protected her, and she wasn't injured. The third prince was furious. With a piercing gaze, he glared at the apparent knight. If it weren't for his sister, he would have torn out all his hair. And this knight still doesn't realize how dangerous his act was. He hasn't seen the princess's true face, and he believes she is some sister of the Colin family. Don't provoke her. And he still greets the little princess with a mischievous smile. The third daughter of the Collins must be so beautiful. But suddenly he realized that something didn't fit. His friend's children, 12 or 13 years old, were all boys. So who was this girl? Before he could clarify, Colin, furious, grabbed him by the neck, apologized to His Highness. The man cleared up in an instant. His legs weakened. He fell to his knees with a thud. This was the legendary princess. The prince's love for their sister was well known. If they found out he had offended her, he would surely have a terrible end. With his head bowed, he repeatedly apologized to the little princess, and Chloe found herself in a predicament. The body of a member of royalty cannot be touched just like that. And assaulting royalty is an even greater crime. If she doesn't punish this man now, her brothers will find out, and he might face an even greater reprimand. So the little princess mustered her courage. She punished him by forcing the knight to clean the entire training ground. Pierce felt instantly relieved after hearing this. Compared to those three cruel and ruthless princes, His Highness, the princess, is simply a kind and adorable little angel. That made him hurry to pick up the tray and get to work. But Chloe, seeing the huge training ground, began to blame herself. What a huge space to clean. How long will it take me? However, at that moment, but suddenly, a group of burly men burst into the enclosure. As soon as they saw Pierce cleaning, they pounced on him. The scene instantly became chaotic. The little princess asked Clin to intervene to stop the fight, but Clin told her that they were actually playing and that Pierce had offended the princess. He should be punished. The girl couldn't help but worry, but before she could speak, the second prince suddenly arrived. The noisy training ground fell silent. Everyone, except the little princess, didn't dare to breathe. Meanwhile, the young man also noticed that he was preparing. The third brother sneaked away, so he grabbed him from the sky. The third prince rolled his eyes in disgust, and the little princess was also sulking. If you don't let go of my third brother, I won't have dinner with you. Hearing this, the second prince had no choice but to let him go. My precious little sister has even learned to threaten. But he can't help it. He's into that kind of thing. So he vented all his jealousy on these recruits, but he didn't imagine that, when he turned around, his own sister had disappeared. In front of his brother, the little princess disappeared. The prince's expression was beyond murderous. His sister had disappeared before his very eyes. And at such a dangerous time, this young man felt unprecedented fear. Not caring about reprimanding those useless subordinates, he furiously ordered everyone to go with him to look for his sister. If we find her, Good. If not, everyone will go keep the little princess company. The second prince felt terribly guilty. His sister had finally been found. She had barely lived a few happy days when he lost her again. He couldn't imagine the torment his sister would suffer at the hands of bad people. What kind of torture would they inflict on her? If so, he wouldn't forgive himself even in death. But a sliver of hope still remained. The third prince has always been by his sister's side, so perhaps she just left for something. Due to the princess's disappearance, the entire palace is searching for her like madmen. However, right now, a certain culprit is leisurely strolling along the riverbank. At this moment, he still doesn't know the big mess he has caused. A moment ago, on the training ground, the little princess, worried that her brother was thirsty, went out to find water. However, as she walked, she reached the depths of the forest. According to her brothers, silver foxes are said to appear near the water. Moved by curiosity, the little prince pushed aside the branches. But he didn't find any silver foxes. Instead, he saw a familiar face. The little prince shuddered with fear. He remembered again when he was a slave, and Miriam mistreated him, and Jean, scared, fell to the ground. He just wanted to find a place to practice with the sword. But he didn't expect that in such a remote place, someone could find him. He begged the little princess not to tell about today, or he would be expelled from the knighthood. It's not that he didn't want to practice with the sword in the training ground, but the other knights don't allow it because he didn't graduate from a fencing school. In all the fencing schools of the empire, they only admit the sons of nobles, even though he learned fencing in secret. He will continue to be marginalized in the knighthood, but if he can't join the order, we won't find her. That sister they sold when she was little. The others started crying as they told the story. The little princess hurried to comfort him, just looking at his hands. He knew how hard that boy worked. Although he more or less suspected that Jan was Million's sister, he, so kind, still wanted to help that poor girl. So the little princess agreed. Jan wouldn't tell about today, and would allow him to practice with the sword outside the palace. Moreover, a bold idea was born in the little princess's heart. She wanted to found a fencing school for common people. In this way, not only will raw materials be reserved for the empire, but these children without status or background will also be given an outlet. At that moment, the little princess still doesn't know that her sudden thought will become a turning point in the history of the empire. In search of their missing sister, your brothers almost turned the palace upside down. Finally, the knights found the little princess in the forest. The second prince finally felt relieved. Upon seeing his sister who had caused trouble, he really wanted to scold her severely. But the girl, with her pitiful appearance, softened his heart. Finally, the second prince didn't dare to utter a single word of reproach. Silently, he increased the number of guards protecting his sister. And back in her chambers, the little princess began preparations for the people's school. The girl roughly calculated the initial construction costs, barely halfway through the count, and it's already an unimaginable expense. The little princess feels a bit discouraged. She can't borrow money from her brothers, but just at that moment, she remembers her personal little treasure. According to the laws of the empire, members of royalty receive a good sum of money for expenses each year. Considering she has been back in the palace for 2 years, she should have a considerable amount. However, when she clearly saw the figures on the list, her mouth fell open. The money listed there was enough to build another 100 luxury schools. She couldn't help but renew her perception of the wealth of royalty. Now all that's missing is land to build the school. But this matter still has to be discussed with her brothers. Just at that moment, the bedroom door was suddenly opened. A maid enthusiastically brought good news. They won the battle. The little princess didn't react immediately. She only listened to the maid telling her that His Majesty the Emperor would soon return to the palace. The girl's eyes instantly turned a beautiful golden color. She could finally see her father. Throughout all these years, her father wrote her letters whenever he could, even since he gave her a name, to even worrying about her studies. Despite being in a dangerous battlefield, he always thinks of his daughter. Although the little princess hasn't seen her father since she was born, she has already grown fond of this kind man. The Emperor's return to the palace is scheduled for the princess's birthday. So the girl waited and waited. Finally, the day of the birthday party arrived. Very early, the little princess put on her prettiest dress. Upon leaving the fitting room, she looked like an exquisite doll. Everyone present exclaimed in amazement. At that moment, the governess announced that someone was looking for her. The little princess thought her father had returned early. Excited, she lifted the hem of her skirt and ran to greet him. But she never imagined that the person arriving was the head of the Olaf Guild. Out of courtesy, the young woman didn't show a hint of disappointment. But she didn't imagine that the guild leader was coming to give her an engagement gift. He is the only one in the world, the princess who manipulates monsters. The empire waited 500 years for her birth. The powerful ancestral dragon prostrated itself before her alone. And the cold princes, because of her appearance, learned to love. However, the little princess didn't realize how noble her position was, like now. The head of the Olaf Guild personally comes to bring gifts. The girl is a little bewildered. It must be known that, according to rumors, this young man disdains associating with the nobility. But before the little princess can say anything, Lan has already spread a pile of exquisitely designed brooches on the table. The glittering gems are obviously of incalculable value. Among them is one unique in the world, a mermaid's pearl. Does he want to sell it to her? Well, the girl was thinking about how to reject him. The young man had already spoken generously. All of this is a welcome gift for you. Now the little princess was even more nervous. Whether it's politics or academic topics, she handles them smoothly. But now she has to face a declaration of love. If she rejected him directly, she would surely offend the guild leader, but accepting him would be unfair to Lan's soul, because in the girl's heart, there is already someone she loves. The little princess struggled between pretending to be foolish, and finally, cunningly, devised a perfect solution. The girl chose the simplest design among all the brooches and kept it, returning the rest to the young man with a smile, subtly expressing her desire to be friends with the caravan leader. Lancelot understood the little princess's hidden meaning. He also understood that the girl was doing this to save face for both of them. So even though he was very sad, he returned a bright smile to the girl. Lancelot didn't leave until an hour later, and the princess's birthday party was about to begin. The hall has already filled with early arriving guests. Everyone is eagerly waiting to behold the princess's beauty. Dio has also come to the banquet with his family. The young man felt the gift he had carefully chosen. A slight blush appeared on his face. Only a few days had passed since their last meeting, but he felt as if a century had gone by. Luckily, the next selection of knights is about to arrive. Thinking of this, Dio was eager to reunite with Chloe. The little princess had already ordered that if the young man wants to see her, he can go whenever he wants. So Dio followed the servant to the princess's room. The closer he got, the faster his heart beat uncontrollably. He told himself he had to stay calm. But when he saw the little princess in her elegant attire, he stood there, dumbfounded, until the girl called out, "Dio!" several times. He snapped out of it, but it was really the girl he liked, with a delicate appearance, even more beautiful than a doll in a shop window. Just as he was preparing to gift the brooch he had painstakingly prepared, he unexpectedly noticed on the girl's chest, "Don't stay with a mermaid unique in the world.